So on the final day of 2023, I thought I'd take a look back at the year that was in rugby, my review of the year. And I can't start that without saying a massive thank you for your support this year. I'm loving the fact you're watching this video. I'm grateful to the many people, maybe you, who have subscribed to the channel at some point during 2023. I only started this channel properly in January, and I'm a bit blown away by how well it's gone. I'm incredibly grateful. I've had some amazing memories, as I will touch upon as we go through the year, and I'm really excited about what's to come. My plan for 2024 is to keep on churning out the rugby videos for you, making sure you've got plenty of content there, and to get to South Africa definitely once. I want to see Ireland v South Africa in what might be the final one of those traditional tours. But because that tour does not go to Cape Town, and I really want to go to Cape Town, I'm toying with the idea of going out for South Africa v New Zealand, the back-to-back test matches there in September. So one, maybe both of those tours, depending on how I can pin down sponsors and just kind of arrange things with my wife, my family, and all that sort of thing. But point being, I'm absolutely buzzing about what's ahead. And if you haven't already, I really hope I earn your subscription. Let's get going then with a review of the year. And let me take you back to January 2023. The World Cup was on the horizon, but at that point, the stories were kind of negative. We were just getting ready for the Six Nations, and Wales were an absolute mess. Wayne Pivac had gone, Warren Gatland now back in charge, but the problems at the WRU were mounting. Their CEO, Stephen Phillips, stepped down after allegations of a toxic environment, and the total omni shambles and snake pit that Wales rugby was overshadowing the build-up to the Six Nations. Wales had their opener against Ireland, but it wasn't just that. For that opening game, for the first time in a long, long time, you did not hear Tom Jones's song Delilah on the matchday playlist because some people were offended by the lyrics. I mean, I agree with all of the stuff about Steve Phillips stepping down and them needing to sort out the WRU management. I think being offended by a song is a little step too far. I mean, if you were going to take that to its logical conclusion, you would ban most national anthems. So anyway, it didn't stop Wales fans singing it or enjoying that song. It just meant that the WRU were too fragile to have it played in their stadium. Fine, their prerogative. Elsewhere, Eben Etzebeth was South Africa's Player of the Year. He was not nominated, if you remember, at the end of 2022. He was not nominated for World Player of the Year, despite having had an incredible year. So, I mean, he was definitely overlooked. At least he got the nod from his South African compatriots, and what a player, and what a year he would go on to have in 2023. And we also saw Eddie Jones's first press conference as Aussie head coach. At the time, there was a lot of people simultaneously thinking, I think it's a bit harsh on Dave Rennie, but also understanding, do you know what, maybe Australian rugby in the doldrums, maybe they need someone with a bit of energy who's going to get eyeballs and attention, because not only have they got the World Cup in 2023, they've got the Lions Tour, they're hosting a World Cup in 27. So there was a bit of optimism surrounding Eddie Jones. Interesting how that went, isn't it? As we move on to February and the Six Nations began, and Ireland absolutely pumped Wales in Cardiff. Hugo Keenan was excellent in that game. I was in Twickenham, and it's one of my first videos on this channel, which you can go back and watch. And I was there to watch Scotland beat England at Twickenham again, and that absolute wonder try from Duhan van der Merwe. It was bad times for England. You know, we changed head coach from Eddie Jones to Steve Borthwick, and yeah, that was some performance from Scotland, woeful from England, and France snuck past Italy in Rome. And then we moved on to round two, and one of the best halves of rugby I'd ever watched up until that point. And it still is one of the best halves of rugby ever. That first half between Ireland and France in Dublin. It was the first match when world ranked number 1 and number 2 in the world had ever played together against each other in a Six Nations game. It was like two prize heavyweights just slugging it out, going toe to toe. It was one of the most enjoyable 40 minutes of rugby I've ever watched. Ireland came through in the second half and won. I think it was 32-19 in the end. But what a match. And just the quality and the intensity of the rugby that was on show was on another level from anything else in the Northern Hemisphere, and it marked out Ireland and France as the two big teams, the two powerhouses in Northern Hemisphere rugby. And there was belief building, given the World Cup was in France, that one of these two teams could be the only other Northern Hemisphere side since England, and apart from England, to actually go on and win a World Cup. It was also Ireland's 13th consecutive win at home, which was the longest ever run of home wins in history for the Irish national team. So momentum was building. That was some game. Meanwhile, you had England beating Italy at Twickenham. You had Scotland getting humping Wales in Edinburgh. And a couple of players, obviously you got a picture of Finn Russell there. I'll get to that game in a second. But for England, I was kind of excited about players like Ollie Hassel-Collins and Alex Dombrandt being given a chance, getting a run of games and maybe showing what they're worth. But they weren't really delivering. Move on, and Ireland beat Italy, England beat Wales, and France beat Scotland in an eventful game in Paris where Grant Gilchrist got sent off after 7 minutes for Scotland. Mohamed Hawass, after 12 minutes, got sent off, not his first red card, and unfortunately for him, he will feature a bit later on in the review of the year 2023. But the Six Nations at this point was bubbling along beautifully. Elsewhere in February, the World Rugby finally acknowledged the fact they made their World Cup draw too early. Scotland were ranked number 5 at this point, and were in a pool with Ireland and South Africa, and it just looked a bit ridiculous. So they said they would change that in future. And elsewhere in New Zealand, they usually, when they're changing head coach, they normally wait until after a Rugby World Cup. I mean, a big part of that is the fact that, think about it, the World Cup final was at the end of October. New Zealand don't have a game for several months yet, but it's in the summer, so they've got time to appoint a new coach after a World Cup. They changed from that mould this time, and they said they would announce the next World Cup before this year's World Cup in 2023. And all we knew was that will not be Fozzie. Why did they change the way they did it? Well, I think we can all see now with hindsight is because Razor was very much in demand and they needed to snap him up before they gave anyone else the chance to. Moving on into March, and Wales chalked up a win finally, winning away in Italy, but it was this game at Twickenham, another game I was there for, and you can see my instant hot take reaction to this game from the media gantry at Twickenham. It was humbling. I mean, I think I said in that video, but go back and have a watch. I think I said that was heartbreaking to watch as an England fan, but I felt honoured to be watching Charles Olivon and Antoine Dupont and Thomas Ramos and Damien Penaud. They were unbelievable. Gregory Aldrit as well was incredible. That was England's heaviest ever defeat at home in the history of the Six Nations, Five Nations, or Home Nations as it was in the past. So we're talking a long time. England's heaviest defeat in any game in the competition. England's heaviest ever defeat at home at Twickenham. I mean, and to be fair, and the reason France were really going for this one is because they had a home World Cup on the horizon and they hadn't beaten England at Twickenham since 2007. Well, they put that right emphatically. Meanwhile, Ireland beat Scotland in what was a World Cup precursor, in which Stuart Hogg made his 100th Test cap appearance. More on him in just a minute. Gary Ringrose made a 50th cap. And then in the final round of the Six Nations, Scotland beat Italy, France beat Wales, and Ireland beat England fairly comfortably. Dan Sheehan, man of the match in that one. And they got themselves the Grand Slam, the 4th ever Grand Slam. Johnny Sexton became the Six Nations all-time top point scorer, taking over from Ronan O'Gara. So Ireland took the spoils and went into the World Cup full of confidence. In terms of the individual awards, it was Antoine Dupont for Player of the Year, Thomas Ramos with the top point scorer, and Damien Penaud was the top try scorer with 5. Stuart Hogg, as I mentioned, he retired he said he was going to retire after the World Cup for club and country, not just retiring from international rugby, but retiring full stop. The World Cup was going to be the end for him. But as we know, the end came a little bit sooner than that in the end. And elsewhere, Sevu Reece had a season-ending injury which would rule him out of the World Cup. And Johnny Sexton had an injury in that final England game when they won the Grand Slam that would effectively mean his Leinster career was over. He would not return until he was pulling on that green jersey again at the Rugby World Cup, as we know now. So we move into April, and club rugby took centre stage. And the Heineken Champions Cup was in the round of 16. I've talked about it on recent videos. I'm still a bit dubious about the format of this competition. I think it's going to take a bit of time to bed in. Some of the rivalries with the South African sides being introduced. I was a little dubious about that when it started, but I have to say, in this round of 16 knockout last year, Sharks beating Munster, Stormers beating Quins, you suddenly saw South African nations, when the fans get behind them and when they're at home, they can really add something to it. But there's still some logistical issues to sort out with this competition. Is it capturing the imagination of South African fans? I think that's going to take a little bit of time yet. But the competition in the knockout stages was fantastic. The Exeter 40, Montpellier 40 round of 16 games was one of the most entertaining matches I've watched. And Exeter went through on tries scored in that one to the quarterfinals, where the following week Leinster, Toulouse, Exeter and La Rochelle won. All the home teams won. The semi-finals threw up a rematch between Leinster in Dublin against La Rochelle. Leinster desperately trying to get that 5th star on their chest. Everything seemed like it was set up for them, but it was La Rochelle who just had an amazing game. What a comeback. Leinster was 17-0 up. They were 23-7 up, I want to say. But it was Ronan O'Gara's La Rochelle, what they call Yellow Munster. And they went and won in Dublin in another heartbreaking moment for Leinster fans who've been put through the ringer in recent years. But what a match. 26-27 was it? Just one of the great rugby matches of 2023, that one. Elsewhere, Leicester, Fainga Anuku, he announced that he was going to be leaving New Zealand shores to go to play in France, which a lot of players do that. You know, Richie Mo'unga, Brodie Retallick, Beauden Barrett, they're off to Japan, as we've seen. But Leicester Fainga Anuku was 23 years of age, and there was some worries that this was going to be a trend which followed. I think New Zealand, the rugby's in a good enough place that they can let players go off and get them back in time to bed in for a new World Cup system. And actually, all it has done, I mean, think of the Sevu Reece injury, all it did was open the door for other players to fill that space, like Fainga Anuku, and what became that amazing New Zealand back three of, well, wings, Will Jordan, Mark Talea, either side of Beauden Barrett. So they've got depth. They'll be absolutely fine. Mohamed Hawass, he had another incident. Not red cards this time, just domestic matters and criminal matters. And he had a contract torn up by Claremont Auvergne because he got in trouble with the police, found guilty of, I'm not sure exactly what the, was it allegations at the time? I know he got found guilty of some sort of domestic abuse. Anyway, it was a very unsavoury affair. Great player, but clearly the guy's got some issues. France into June, they won the under-20s World Championship again. The TMO bunker was trialled in that one. Good, it got a trial. There won't be any problems with the TMO bunker moving forward. And the Rugby World Cup's squads started to be announced. In Club Rugby, you had the Super Rugby final. Super Rugby competition had been bubbling along nicely. New Zealand side still dominating. The semi-finals were the Chiefs against the Brumbies, Crusaders against the Blues. The Chiefs and the Crusaders came through that one. It was a brilliant final, actually. The final went... the lead changed hands a bunch of times. No team ever got ahead. You had great storylines. Razor, the next New Zealand coach, head coach, could he go out on a high with the Crusaders and a perfect record? The two fly halves opposite each other, Mackenzie and Mo'unga, who would be the 10 for the All Blacks? Who will be the 10 moving forward for the All Blacks? If either of them. And it was a fantastic game. But you got to say something about the Crusaders. They know how to come through. By any margin, really. And it was Chiefs 20, Crusaders 25 in this one. Was it Cody Taylor got a couple of tries? One for Richie Mo'unga as well. Really, really good final. And the Double Dongs got themselves another Super Rugby Championship. And fair play. On to the Rugby Championship then, as we move through July now. And South Africa's beatdown of Australia in that first game in, was it Pretoria? You had the Pretoria DJ knocking out all the 90s hip-hop in between plays, and in the meantime, Kurtley Arendse just showing he was an absolute world-class finisher, and South Africa with an ominous start to the Rugby Championship, and things not looking good for Australia. Jean Kleyn made his international debut for South Africa, having gone back after being an Ireland international 3 years previous. Richie Arnold, Carter Gordon, Tom Hooper made their Australian debuts. Meanwhile, New Zealand pumped Argentina away in Mendoza. And then it was that game in round 2 in Auckland. New Zealand 35, South Africa 20. A Richie Mo'unga masterclass. The kicking variation from Bowden Barrett, from Geordie Barrett, from Aaron Smith, from Richie Mo'unga just dominated South Africa in that particular game. Shannon Frizzell was a monster as well. And you thought, right, New Zealand are in. Meanwhile, Argentina got a great win in Sydney. Michael Cheika getting one over on Eddie Jones with a last-minute win. And then that moved through to the final round of games where New Zealand beat Australia comfortably and South Africa snuck past Argentina, Ebenezer being huge of that one. So New Zealand won themselves another Rugby Championship. So then we get to... I'm just rattling through. Then we get to World Cup squads starting to be announced. And no Quay Cooper, no Michael Hooper for Australia. Some of the big surprises. Eddie Jones thinking I can make do with one fly half, a newbie in Carter Gordon. I don't need experience. I'll just rely on kids. And that experience, well, that's a big experience for Eddie Jones. I think he might have learned some lessons. Unfortunately for Australia, the lesson cost them big time at a Rugby World Cup. And what Eddie Jones might do to rewind and go back to that point. Now, the issues in Australian rugby run much, much deeper than their performance at the 2023 World Cup. But that decision right there did not help matters. That is for sure. And Eddie Jones had that, I was going to say entertaining. It's so negative. The most negative press conference in the world ever. So negative. Well, as it turned out, the journalists maybe had a reason to be negative. There was just negativity surrounding Australia rugby all year, and it's going to take quite a lot to turn that ship around, unfortunately, with the British and Irish Lions tour on the horizon, with a home World Cup in 4 years. They have got work to do. In other World Cup squads, no Alex Donbrandt for England was maybe a surprise. Other than that, I'm trying to think. We got into the Autumn Nations series, didn't we? And that game at Twickenham, what a match that was. That was another one of the great matches of the year. South Africa, having been beaten comfortably in Auckland, absolutely smashed New Zealand. Now, you could say that New Zealand had just got off the plane and weren't quite acclimatised. South Africa probably had the same issue, although the time zones they travel through doesn't matter as much, and a lot more of their players are based in Europe, obviously. But it was an ominous performance in Twickenham, and if you remember, in fact, this was one of my most viewed videos of the year. It was me having a little bit of a light-hearted dig at Jeff Wilson and John Kerwin just losing it, having a total meltdown on the breakdown. If you haven't seen that video, it's in the feed. Go and check it out. I think it's my second most viewed video of anything I've ever done. They just lost it. I felt a little bit sorry for Muls Muliaina trying to sort of rein them in a little bit and not having any success. They were kicking off about all sorts of things, and actually what they needed to say was New Zealand were beaten by a much better team on the day. And then we moved to the Rugby World Cup, and you know what, let me just talk generally about the Rugby World Cup from a personal point of view. This was a dream come true for me. I had never watched a Rugby World Cup game in my life, live in the flesh, and there I was in France, in a camper van, travelling up and down the country, watching matches and having you to be able to enjoy it with. One of the things I'm most proud of that I managed to bring from that was, I think I captured, and certainly a lot of the comments seem to point this out, I captured the kind of raw emotion as a fan. And I went there very much, you know, I work in the media, radio, television, and I'm a journalist in that sense, but I'm not a journalist here. This channel is not about being a rugby journalist. I am a fan, just like you, and I kick every ball and I hit every hit, like emotionally, and I wanted to capture that and get that across at the Rugby World Cup. And I'm a fan of rugby first and foremost. So I also think, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think I managed to do a decent job of putting aside my own partisan national pride and I'm a very proud Englishman. I want my England team to win, but I love rugby so much, so I can appreciate great rugby, great players, great matches. And my goodness me, did I have some experiences watching some games at this World Cup. That I didn't actually watch this one in the flesh. I was in Marseille for the first weekend, but watched on the harbour in Marseille that first game between France and New Zealand, and that just set the tone for the next 7 weeks. Some incredible rugby. Other highlights in the pool stages: Fiji, their wins over Australia, the narrow defeat to Wales, and Wales' resurgence as well, bearing in mind what they've been through 2023 and how negatively that year started. That was great to see. The one of the best matches I've ever seen, and I was there in Paris. Another one of my most viewed videos actually was the video immediately following full time in Paris at the Stade de France, having watched another heavyweight prize fight, slugging it out, South Africa and Ireland. And it felt really significant at the time for Ireland, but with hindsight, you kind of can see, can't you, that South Africa knew they had a longer plan. Maybe they've been there and done it and won World Cups. They know what it takes. Therefore, they knew it was not all on this game. Don't get me wrong, South Africa were trying to win, but it felt massive for Ireland. And well, we know how it ended up, and it's going to be a tough one for Ireland fans to get over. But I'm absolutely convinced, particularly with the change in the format of the Rugby World Cup next time, Ireland are going to get out of the quarterfinals. They're going to win themselves some knockout games, and they're only going to get better, because their under-20 side is fantastic as well. Their club setup's brilliant. But what a game that was in Paris. Absolutely epic. We had other great quarterfinals. Weirdly, that quarterfinal weekend, the best weekend of rugby we have ever seen. Certainly that I've ever seen. And having said that the World Cup draw was a joke, which it was because the World Cup draw was a joke that it threw up these really well-matched quarterfinals. England v Fiji, Wales v Argentina, and then those 2 games in Paris. My goodness me. New Zealand against Ireland was incredible. All the players out on their feet. That picture tells it all. The New Zealand players, a lot of them didn't have the energy to celebrate on the final whistle. They were just relieved. It was an incredible game. And at the time, everyone was saying, myself included, that's the best game of rugby I've ever watched. And then 24 hours later, we got France v South Africa, the best game I have ever seen. And the drama in that, the charge down from Cheslin Colby, the breakaway tries with South Africa's crossfield kick, tactical genius of Jacques Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus, and of the players to execute that plan, the faultless goal kicking of Andre Pollard after he came on, just world-class match. And yeah, I was in France for the whole of the Rugby World Cup, and the French fans, the French media, they did not take this result well. And they're going to take a long time to get over this. Even Antoine Dupont, who is just such an amazing ambassador for the sport, he lost it a little bit and said some things that I reckon he might regret with hindsight. Showed a little lack of class, but that's because they were heartbroken. And to the victor go the spoils. And that man, those 2 men there, Peter Steph Toy and Quagga Smith, immense. And you've got to mention Oxen Che as well, who when it got to a semi-final, and one of the worries was, yeah, the quarterfinals are going to be competitive, but the semi-finals are going to be total blowouts. And it was with the first semi-final. I was there in Paris for them. New Zealand comfortably beating Argentina, who didn't really show up. But that second semi-final between England and South Africa, in terms of tension and intensity, that was a proper ding-dong battle in horrendous conditions. And it was just, and I was heartbroken as an England fan, but just as a rugby fan, I kind of loved that one of the stories of the knockout stages of the World Cup was that the scrum, which so many people have been so negative about, is still such an important part of rugby. And so is taking your points when they're on offer. And look to the final, and that's one of the things that New Zealand may rue. But the best team did win. An incredible story. And this is one thing I learnt from my time in France, is that South African national team does not just represent a rugby team, it represents a nation in a way that I hadn't appreciated until I spoke to lots of South Africans, and I have no understanding of, having grown up in England, the issues that there are in South Africa politically, culturally, economically, just mean what this team represents and what it's been able to do is transcendent of rugby, and it's why I cannot begrudge, and I'm actually more than that, delighted that they won another Rugby World Cup. And it's another reason why I want to go and examine the power of rugby in that nation by getting there during 2024. What a fantastic end from a rugby point of view that was to the year on the international stage, and a great final, two fantastic teams, and it went right down to the wire. Ardie Savia, a deserved player of the season. Distinct lack of South Africans in that team of the year was a little bit of a joke, but you know what? All the South African players who got overlooked have to think back to is that. It's all that really matters. Ardie Savia would have traded that for winning the Webb Ellis Trophy, no doubt. And then Eddie Jones finally said goodbye to Australia. What other things have happened? We're moving into November now. And Owen Farrell... Oh, we're back to the start, sorry. Oh, never mind, doesn't matter. Owen Farrell stood back from international rugby. Antoine Dupont said he was going to go off and play for France at the Olympics, meaning he won't be available in the Six Nations. Simon Rao-Louis left Fiji and he's taken up a role with World Rugby. Really pleased about that, because that is a guy I would trust with the pathways of some of the developing nations. Eddie Jones, after leaving Australia, finally put the whole saga to an end by announcing he was going to Japan. And Michael Cheika leaving Argentina, Felipe Contepomi taking over. And I think, in terms of international rugby and the big rugby stories, that is 2023 in a nutshell. Overall, from a personal point of view, an incredible year because of what's happened on this channel, which I could not have imagined, and I've been blown away. But actually, you know what? Now I'm hungrier than ever to keep building and keep going. And this channel is all about the community, the quality of the comments, the positivity of the comments is always astounding, and I love that this is a place where true rugby fans get together, and that is what I want to look after and keep nurturing. And so again, thank you for everything you've done this year, for getting stuck in, and I'll keep making the content you want. So keep your ideas, your thoughts, your comments down there. Keep hitting that thumbs up button because it helps spread the word. It is just me. It is just me. And there was a little list that someone on Twitter had done where they've sort of listed the biggest rugby YouTube channels, and I'm at like number 25. Having started from nothing at the start of the year, I'm at number 25, and so help me get further up. And a lot of the names above me are like big organisations and companies and people that have marketing teams that can spend money on getting the word out there. I can't do any of that. I've just got you. So once again, thank you. And here's to a great 2024. I'll see you on the next video.